Good morning, and I think we have some really big news for NIO today regarding the Hong Kong listing of NIO, which I guess most of you will like, and it is a pretty positive news. So let's jump into it about what is it, the way NIO has done it, and also what I think will be the consequences of it. But first of all, I have to say I'm of course no financial advisor, and I'm also not a lawyer, so this is just my layman understanding of things that are about to happen. Do your own due diligence and research, and if you need, ask a professional for advice. So let's go into it. So first of all, what is important here is that this is an official news release of the investor relations of NIO. So this is not speculation, this is official news by NIO released that the company has received a letter of in principle approval to the listing application of the stock exchange in Hong Kong today on February 28th. And here you can already see the listing document. By the way, really nice ticker symbol here with the numbers 9866, lucky numbers or good numbers connotated in Chinese. So what does it all mean, and what are the consequences, and how has NIO done this? Well, first of all, this will be a so-called secondary listing in Hong Kong. So that means NIO will stay with their primary listing actually at the New York Stock Exchange. And what is different in the case of how NIO is doing this Hong Kong listing in comparison to example for Li Auto or XPeng is that it will not be a separate company or separate shares that are being created. Therefore, it's also not dilutive. Instead, what NIO is going to do is that NIO and Tencent are actually lending some shares that are currently traded at the New York Stock Exchange, and those shares will be designated for the initial trading for the dealers in Hong Kong, and thereby it means that there is no new shares being created, and instead could have quite interesting consequences there, because the shares that are traded in Hong Kong, for example, cannot be shorted. So all of the float that in the future will actually be trading in Hong Kong is kind of not exposed to the consequences that a listing in the US has, or the trading in the New York Stock Exchange market, where we have this so-called short selling mechanisms. And so while the float that is in Hong Kong will be smaller compared to the float that is in the US, we still may see over time that there are these implications, positive implications possibly, that the float that is in Hong Kong is not affected by short selling. And so this effect will possibly show over time as some of the funds and institutions, and maybe even private trader, are buying their shares in Hong Kong instead of New York Stock Exchange, or even advising their brokerages to convert into Hong Kong shares. And this will also have the effect that some of those brokers or market makers or institutions out there who are lending shares for short selling may actually be doing this in a less obvious extent, because they need also to face those new realities that not all of the NIO stock will be traded in New York in the future. Now, the next big effect, of course, is that, the delisting fear, will it go away? And I was always saying this is mainly also a psychological fear in a way, because a company like NIO, at least that's my take, will always trade somewhere. There will always be investors interested in owning shares of this company, and the share ownership, as I always said, will not go away with a delisting. The only question is, where will the shares be traded? And there might have been those worst case scenarios that NIO gets delisted and has kind of nowhere to trade, right? So maybe some institutions and owners have kind of priced this in and may now actually return into buying NIO, because this fear should actually go away. Now it's clear that in case NIO gets delisted, and this could still be a possibility if it's getting delisted in the US, then they can trade NIO in Hong Kong, and also, by the way, in Singapore, where NIO is also applying for a secondary listing. So that's another news today. And so yeah, this gives kind of some relief on this delisting issue. However, I also have to say, like, clearly that in case that a holding for an accountable act is kind of going through, and by 2025 or whenever the company is not compliant anymore, needs to delist from the US stock exchanges, then still we would have those news flows around, but certainly you will have a way of owning and trading the company if you're able to trade in Hong Kong. On the other hand, the way that NIO is doing this with keeping the primary listing in the US could also signal in a way that, look guys, we intend to stay listed in New York and we want to become compliant, and we think the regulation will soon be in place, and we'll be able to have our books audited by the PCAOB. Also, we are strictly complying and confirming with the listing rules in the US, because also this is exactly what's happening. Hong Kong made it easier for those secondary listings because basically they said, like, the New York Stock Exchange already has listing requirements that are quite similar to ours, and thereby we make it much more easy for companies that already have a listing somewhere else, like in New York, to actually get listed in Hong Kong too. And so, NIO is basically sending the signal here that, the main jurisdiction or legal framework that we are adhering to on the accounting, on the oversight, on listing regularities is actually in the US. And we want to stick committed to being listed in the US, so that also US shareholders or shareholders that primarily want to actually be trading at the US exchanges can actually benefit from that. Now, there are, of course, many other positive effects also from a homecoming of being listed in Hong Kong. Although NIO will, in a first step, not be able to be connected to the Stock Connect to the mainland because that's not available for secondary listings, still there might be more people at home that are able to buy the shares in Hong Kong. It's also having a closer distance to institutional investors in Singapore, in Hong Kong then. And so, this will have various effects of more confidence, more people who understand the brand and the company will be closer to the listing and more likely to invest. And also this will actually have the effects that, for example, overnight, if we have some issues, some news coming out, then in the morning when Hong Kong opens, those kind of traders that are closer to the home land are actually able to digest this news and act upon it. And so we may see actually different reactions in pre-market trading to some news connected, and maybe this overall will have some positive effects in terms of a bigger confidence and higher valuations of NIO ultimately. And it will add liquidity, so more people are trading it, and also possibly more buying power as well. Of course, there will always be a seller for each buyer, but of course there might be more demand for NIO stock ultimately this way, while actually not having to increase the float, as this is not a dilutive offering here. So all in all, these effects should be largely positive. So while this is the news for today, it doesn't mean that this will go in effect immediately. There might be some hedge funds that are front running this and like trying to price in the expectations towards that. Can be in both ways, of course. And then over time, when we see the actual listing and the institutions making up their minds of what this actually means, we will see these effects possibly over time, and we will see if some of the doubts about NIO will go away with that. And also some people say that NIO's stock price has disconnected from the fundamentals because of this overhang of delisting. We'll see now if this was really the case, and whether or not there have been such kind of psychological effects to the NIO stock price. because as I mentioned before, like this has been largely a mental thing around the delisting issue, but of course it should have effects largely also on the retail investors who are possibly also scared and forced to sell out during the high volatility of NIO stock, and also this largely negative news aligned with delisting. So overall, I think this is a very exciting news for NIO today, and let's see how this will benefit the NIO stock price this week, although we have of course a very difficult macro environment. And NIO is a very volatile stock. So on the downside, it's having a high beta, which means that it will correct further than, let's say, the indexes. And well, this is positive on the upside because NIO will also rise higher and faster than other stocks. But on the downside, this will actually lead to larger decreases, unfortunately. So let's see what the markets will do this week. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next one.